Hi, my name is Dr. Terry, and today I'm going to present to you the importance of a SWOT analysis and why, as an organizational leader, you would want to know about this and the implications it could have on your organization. When it comes to a SWOT analysis, it truly helps us develop a strategic plan for our organization, and it also helps us determine what things we're really good at, what things are we not so good at, and it provides us with more information. In terms of a corporate strategy, when using that SWOT analysis, for example, it tells us or gives us an action plan on how to achieve something. It also directs us on how the best way to use the organizational resources to achieve the goals and objectives that we have for the organization. On a business level, it helps us to make sure that we're utilizing our resources in the most effective way to, again, achieve those goals and objectives. So let's talk about the SWOT analysis and what it truly is. There are 4 variables in a SWOT analysis. And when we talk about a SWOT analysis, the acronym SWOT, we're talking about the organizational strengths, its weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what we're going to do is cover those and explain what that means and how it would affect you as an organization, and the things that as an organizational leader we would have to or want to consider. When it comes to strengths, we're really talking about the niche. What makes you special? What separates you from the crowd or other competitors in the organization? So when we're talking about your strengths, it's what you do really well as an organization. And we have to always consider that because no organization has unlimited resources. So we have to be very cognizant, very careful on how we use those resources. So if I was an organizational leader and I found that our strengths, for example, was in IT, I would want to devote a lot of resources into that so it can produce the effect that we're striving for. So our strengths are very important when it comes to the SWOT analysis. So it helps to support that niche, that thing that we do differently from everyone else that's going to keep us in the market for as long as we possibly can. The other thing we have to consider in terms of the resources, again, because this is very important, is we don't have unlimited resources. So as an organizational leader, I have to be very careful about how I use those resources. If a project, for example, is not doing really well, or we're not making money from a particular item that maybe we're selling or producing, we may want to consider taking resources from that project and shifting it to a niche that we have or something that's doing very well in the organization. So that would be an effective way to use that. So that strength, our niche, what we do really well in the organization or as an organization, what separates us from the crowd, that's very important to understand. Think of a SWOT analysis as a report card because it really truly tells us what we're doing really well, what we're doing okay with, and what things we can improve on. So let's talk about the weaknesses. And by the way, the first 2, the strengths and weaknesses, are internal attributes of the organization. So we're looking at ourselves internally and how we are functioning outside of the organization. We're talking about those things that we don't do so well. You know, we don't have a lot of, for example, skills or mindset or core capabilities in that area. And as organizational leader, we would have to consider, is it in our best interest to take those resources and apply it or put it towards that particular item that we're doing? So for example, if we were building a computers and then we find out during the course of the project, we don't have the expertise to do that, one of the things we would have to consider is, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And more importantly, maybe we shouldn't be devoting resources to that particular project. Hence, we would take those resources and, again, apply them to those things that we're doing really well with. Opportunities. So in any market, we're always looking for room to grow. there is always opportunity out there. So when it comes to doing this strategic plan using a SWOT analysis, we're always looking for ways to grow our organization, because one of the things we want to do is to think about longevity. How do I stay in this market? How do I change? How do I bring innovation into a product or service that I'm producing so we can be there for the next 5 or 10 years? So we're always looking for opportunities, but one of the things we have to consider when we're looking at those opportunities, does it make sense for us? Do we have those core capabilities, for example? Do we have the resources to do that? So we're always looking for opportunities for growth, more income, and possibly more market share. The final part of the SWOT analysis is the threats. Irrespective of what organization or type of business you're in, you're always going to have some type of threats out there. It's not uncommon, even for the largest companies, to have some type of threats out there. And basically, when we talk about threats, it's what does our competitors do better than we do? And how might they be using those things to take market share away from us? So we have to consider that. In any business that we go into, we are going to have threats. What we have to do as an organization is A, realize that there are threats out there, but more importantly, how are we going to counter-react those threats? So as an organizational leader, we would have to understand, yes, there are threats out there, but what can we do as an organization to better position ourselves so we can minimize those threats in the organization? So in essence, the SWOT analysis, it's a report card. It tells us how we're doing internally. It tells us how we're doing externally as well. But SWOT analysis is not the only analysis out there. There are many other analysis out there that we can possibly use to help us become competitive in the marketplace. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of a SWOT analysis. Because like with everything, there's good and there's bad. And we have to be very cognizant of that, the good and the bad. And then we try to make this work or change it to make it fit our overall strategic plan. So pros, it helps us in a decision-making process. Maybe we're thinking about going into a particular area. We're not sure what type of skills that are needed. We're not sure how much money is going to be invested. We're not sure about the time length that it's going to take to do it. Having or doing a SWOT analysis definitely will help us in that area. The other thing that's going to help us is determine the impact on our organization. Because if we decide to go into a particular area and maybe we don't have the expertise, well, one of the things I need to consider is what impact will it have on our organization. And a SWOT analysis is very good in helping us with that. It also helps us in achieving those business goals and objectives. So whatever goals and objectives that have been formulated based off our strategy or our SWOT analysis, the SWOT analysis will help us to get to those goals and objectives. Like with using any type of plan, it's not perfect, and of course you're going to have to adjust to it depending on your internal and external environment as an organizational leader. But some of the things that you have to consider is that with a SWOT analysis, it may not address all the different variables that you may have to consider as an organization. So that's something we have to be very cognizant about, is it may not address something that you may feel that's important. For example, it may not address technology issues, and you would still have to consider that. Secondly, when we do a SWOT analysis, it really has to do with what's happening in that particular time. What it doesn't account for is things change. Your external environment, which we don't have any control over, it's going to change. And we have to understand that the SWOT analysis that you did in January may not reflect those changes 6 months down the road. So we have to always think about maybe changing or updating that SWOT analysis. And then the final thing is it really doesn't take into consideration change, as I stated earlier. Your internal environment is going to change. Your external environment will always change. And you have to be able to change as your external environment dictates. And that's one of the issues that a lot of organizational leaders have with a SWOT analysis. The key important points: a SWOT analysis is a very good analysis. It's a good start for any organization. It can be used for any organization. However, there are some drawbacks, and we just have to always remind ourselves is that we constantly may have to update that, especially when it comes to our external environment, because we really truly don't have any control over that. So to sum it all up, a SWOT analysis, it's a report card. It tells us how we're doing. It tells us how we're doing internally. It tells us how we're doing externally. It gives us options how to improve. It also would indicate what areas we should focus our resources on. Not only